the man of many voices, my friend, G.C. Cameron. Let's give him another hand. And for those of you who are watching virtually, we're closing now, and before I give my closing remarks and before you watch the closing video, we have to acknowledge those who have helped pull this together. Remember, we and us and not me and I. So we have to acknowledge Jeff Chartrand and Pete Gunlogson, to Wealth Watchers Incorporated, to Life, Leadership is for Everyone Incorporated, to the University of North Florida Center for Urban Education and Policy, for the United Way, for the East Side Brotherhood, for my son, Rodney Lawrence Hurst II, for Journey to Joy, for Vanguard Solutions Consultant, for Yellow House, for Ron Summers, for Brenda Priestley Jackson, for Rutledge Pearson, thank you for spending some time with us today as we commemorate, not celebrate, commemorate this 60th anniversary. The key in all of this is that we understand what happened. That we understand this history. Today, Black and white Americans must realize the important, rich legacy of the civil rights movement and the struggle for Black human dignity and respect. There are those who feel the civil rights struggle is over. You know, that post-racial thing. Certainly, there are no visual signs that exclaim colored waiting rooms or colored lunch counters or colored water fountains. As a young Black lady said to me, we can go everywhere we want and do everything we want. Because you cannot see the visible vestiges of racism does not mean that racism no longer exists. Fighting for civil rights today requires the same diligence as it did in the 50s and the 60s. Believe me, there is still a war to fight. Racism is an undergirding evil which permeates the very fiber of this country, founded on a racist Christian ideal. If we are committed to meaningful race relations in Jacksonville and in this country, we must have uncomfortable conversations about racism between white folks and Black folks. Racism is vile disrespect. Racism is violent hatred. Racism is not a fringe component of America. Racism was historically foundational to the development of America. Amid the hatred and the disrespect, Blacks are never expected to voice their opinions on racism. Blacks are expected to accept the benevolence of white America obediently and gratefully, which allows them to remain in this country. The feeling that blacks contributed nothing to this country in spite of who they are. That everything that happened in this country is as a result of the goodwill and the beneficence of white America. That is a myth. As a result of the continuing battlefield in this country called the educational system, black students must deal with an incomplete, dishonest, and a racist American history. They must study an American history which excludes and ignores salient contributions by blacks while deifying contributions by whites, whether they are true or not. Then we have race relations studies. I have lived in Jacksonville all of my life, and at times race relations studies amuse me. Every time you survey blacks in Jacksonville and ask them to document the problems and the impact of discriminatory practices and racism, they give you countless examples. Racial profiling, job discrimination, the white media, first fired at times of downsizing, woefully inadequate support and resources for schools located in the black community, problems with the police, lack of infrastructure improvements in the community. The list is long, and the supporting documents can be stacked from the floor to the ceiling. After completion, these studies usually go on the shelf with weak promises to address the problems. You can compare every racial study completed in Jacksonville over the years and find that the results are remarkably similar. That means the problems have not changed, and this community has not addressed them. Blacks know that racial studies done in Jacksonville have provided few positive results and usually only benefit the paid consultants. Despite their good intentions, a few study groups here and there and some superficial mouthings will not solve the problem. They will never succeed until there is a real resolve to make substantive changes. Jane O'Neill, a white former school teacher and an anti-racist writer and lecturer, asked this question of an all-white audience. By a show of hands, this former school teacher asked of her white audience, how many of you would like to be treated the way blacks are treated in this country? No hands went up. Mrs. O'Neill said, you apparently did not hear me. Let me ask the question again. By a show of hands, how many of you in this audience would like to be treated the same way blacks are treated in this country? No hands went up. Miss O'Neill said to her white audience, which means you know how blacks are treated in this country, and you don't want any parts of it. My question to you is, what are you going to do about it? Many years ago, young members of the Jacksonville Youth Council, NAACP, really merely children, understood the fight and racism and the struggle. Following the lead of a courageous young black school teacher, they fought to right some of the wrongs of racism in Jacksonville. Such fights are never easy, but you base your fight on the courage of your convictions, because doing nothing is not an option. Today's generation of millennials and our integration children must understand that as long as you are identifiable by the color of your skin, your survival is at stake. You are in the struggle, like it or not. You cannot blend in, even though many of you try. The struggle is not a game. The struggle is real. When you demand respect, you get respect. Some blacks do not know how to demand respect. Ask yourself, as Mr. Pearson asked us, are you a part of the problem, or are you a part of the solution? 120 years ago, James Weldon Johnson wrote "Lift Every Voice and Sing." When Reverend Matthew Gilbert left the pastorship of Bethel Baptist Institutional Church, he became the president of Florida Baptist Academy, and he took with him the organist and the choir director from Bethel Baptist Institutional Church at that time in 1892, John Rosamond Johnson. Bethel Baptist was an institutional church because they had an educational component. They helped to start Florida Baptist Academy, which is now Florida Memorial University. Classes on Florida Baptist Academy used to meet on the campus of Bethel Baptist Institutional Church. So in closing, today we celebrate 120 years of Lift Every Voice and Sing. Today we commemorate 60 years of Axe Handle Saturday and the 1960 sit-ins. Today we celebrate the changing of the name of this park from a Confederate treasonous anarchist to one of Jacksonville's favorite native sons, James Weldon Johnson, in a bill introduced by Councilman Garrett Dennis. Bottom line, if it were not for Bethel Baptist Institutional Church, there never would have been a Lift Every Voice and Sing. So keeping that in mind, we're going to play Bethel Baptist Institutional Church's mass choir singing Lift Every Voice and Sing, this video. After the video, this young dynamic minister of First Baptist Church of Oakland, Reverend Christopher McKee, will then come to give his final remarks and the benediction. I thank you for being here with us. Those virtually, those of you in the park, safe distance and with your masks on. I hope you understood how important it is for us to know what happened. And now that you know, you can tell somebody else. The Bethel Baptist Institutional Church Mass Choir, singing on the anniversary of the 40th anniversary of Bishop Rudolph McKissick Sr. And after you watch them sing Lift Every Voice and Sing, which James Weldon Johnson always thought of as a hymn, not an anthem. After you watch them sing that, then Reverend McKee will come up with final observations and the benediction.